Good afternoon and welcome to Healthy Eating, Healthy Lifestyle, Smart Nutrition Practices for Men. I'm your on-site coach, Shannon Parks, a registered dietitian nutrition professional, and I'm excited to jump into today's presentation and content with you. Before we get started, a simple disclosure that all information contained in today's presentation is for informational purposes only and is not to be used as medical advice. Please consult your in-network physician for any specific medical information. Additionally, we will have time today for question and answer at the end, so please jot down any questions that you have throughout today's presentation, and we'll have some time at the end to cover them together. Okay, so what are we going to be covering today? In today's presentation, we are going to go over the 5 main nutritional gaps that affect men and how to correct them. We'll cover the 5 main health concerns impacting men today and how to reverse, prevent, and overcome those conditions and diagnoses. And we'll talk solutions too by covering 5 easy to implement improvements to your health and well-being today. And then we'll wrap up with about 5 minutes of question and answer with yours truly, your on-site health coach. So let's go ahead and dive in. The role of nutrition in men's health. Nutritional demands in men really do fluctuate across the lifespan, driven by physiological shifts such as the peak muscle mass gain, hormone changes throughout the lifespan of a man, and age-related metabolic declines. 2 main contributing factors in men's health and well-being, testosterone and insulin sensitivity, naturally peak during adolescence and decline approximately 1% annually after age 30. Adequate nutritional interventions are linked to the prevention of leading causes of both morbidity and mortality in men, which are cardiovascular disease, prostate cancer, type 2 diabetes, and sarcopenia. Furthermore, emerging research suggests that gender differences in healthcare seeking necessitate proactive and targeted nutritional interventions for men who are statistically less likely than women to seek out preventative care and doctor's visits. The 2020 through 2025 dietary guidelines for Americans emphasizes early adoption of nutrient-dense, anti-inflammatory dietary patterns for men to extend not just their health span, but also their lifespan and the quality of their life too. So let's look at those main nutrient gaps. Nutrition deficiencies can really have a wide array of associated symptoms, which can make them hard to pinpoint at times. This is an example of why nutrition intake can and should be the first-line intervention in any diagnosis, as sometimes correcting deficiencies can cause the symptoms someone was experiencing to subside or go away entirely. Due to the nature of restrictive diets that limit our intake, nutrient-poor food choices, limited or no nutrient supplementation, or possibly absorption issues, many men experience nutrient gaps of vitamins or minerals, which are called your micronutrients, in their day-to-day dietary intake. So the main 5 nutrient gaps that men experience are vitamin D, magnesium, potassium, fiber, and omega-3s. And we're going to dive into each of those individually. So let's start talking about vitamin D. When considering vitamin D, the recommended daily allotment for men under the age of 70 is 15 micrograms or 600 international units, IU. You might be more familiar with that with vitamin D supplements, whereas over the age of 70, the RDA increases to 20 micrograms or 800 international units a day. Now, living in Florida, the Sunshine State, many men might think, oh, I get plenty of sun exposure. I spend a lot of time outside. I don't need any vitamin D supplementation. But that actually may not be the correct line of thinking. In order to get enough sun exposure to generate adequate vitamin D, we need most of our body, most of our skin exposed as in a swimsuit for at least 30 minutes every day without sunblock, which unfortunately protects our skin but blocks the absorption of vitamin D. And due to our concerns about wrinkles and skin cancer and skin health in general, many people often wear sunscreen, and so we're not getting enough of that vitamin D from the sun. Interestingly, vitamin D acts like a hormone in our bodies and really does help with a slew of functions throughout the body, aside from just making strong bones and teeth. Deficiency in vitamin D is linked to an inability to fight infections, muscular weakness, fatigue, development of diabetes, or certain cancers, development of multiple sclerosis, depression, heart disease, high blood pressure, and even stroke. Though there aren't many foods naturally high in vitamin D, you can sneak some into your diet, roughly about 10% of the daily intake requirement, by consuming mushrooms, especially if they've been left out in the sun for about 15 minutes prior to cooking them or eating them. Egg yolks from pasture-raised hens with more sun exposure are going to be more rich in vitamin D, dark chocolate, and of course, vitamin D fortified foods. So a note about fortified foods, several decades ago, I want to say it was back in the 50s or 60s, the federal government noticed that there was a lot of vitamin and mineral deficiencies being experienced by Americans. And so to combat that, they started fortifying foods, which is the practice of in the processing or manufacturing of foods. It's when they add nutrients back in, such as vitamin D, calcium, iron, etc. All right, let's talk about magnesium. This is my favorite personal nutrient, which is such a dietitian thing to say, but I really do often refer to it as a miracle mineral just because it plays so many versatile roles in the body, from regulating heart rate and blood pressure to leveling out our blood sugar, keeping our bowels healthy, improving our sleep, and it even acts as brakes on our stress response system. Magnesium really does do wonders for us. Early symptoms of magnesium deficiency may look like fatigue, loss of appetite, muscle spasms, nausea, difficulty falling or staying asleep, or even constipation. The recommended daily intake for men is 400 to 420 milligrams a day, and foods highest in magnesium are going to be those such as oysters, avocados, pumpkin seeds, and chocolate. And we can see here statistically about 60% of men are deficient in magnesium. Potassium. So over 98% of men don't meet the adequate intake threshold for potassium. Potassium intake recommendations are about 3,400 milligrams a day. And this isn't something that you want to just rush out and go get a potassium supplement, because too much is not a good thing. So men do have a higher potassium need than women, and symptoms of lower potassium can range from mild symptoms all the way through severe symptoms with signs such as fatigue, muscle weakness or cramps, constipation, or an exacerbation of high blood pressure in individuals with existing high blood pressure. Luckily, there are ample sources of potassium available in our diet from foods such as bananas, oranges, avocados, potatoes, spinach, tomatoes, lentils, salmon, and even yogurt. Fiber. This is another one I talk about a lot as a dietitian, but fiber is a nutrient that both men and women tend to fall short of, with most people missing the mark on fiber in their daily dietary intake. When we think of fiber, try to think less about the products like the Benefiber, the Fiber Ones, Metamucil, and think more about the fiber found in plant foods. Fiber in plant foods, it actually makes up the cell structure of the plant foods. And so we want to think about fresh produce, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. These all contain fiber in them. And it's also important to know that there are two kinds of fiber. soluble and insoluble fiber, and both of them have really different roles within our body. And unfortunately, many times the over-the-counter fiber supplements only supply our body with one kind of fiber when really we need both kinds of fiber. And lastly, omega-3 fatty acids or healthy fatty acids, they act as a part of the support structure of every single cell in our body, and we need them in our diet because our body can't make them on their own. Omega-3s also help provide some energy, promote heart health, healthy lungs, healthy blood vessels, and boost our immune system. And in general, the American diet tends to fall short of omega-3 fatty acids for both men and women alike, in favor of a higher intake of omega-6 fatty acids, which are unfortunately inflammatory. Those are going to be found in a lot of your packaged and processed foods and fast foods. So we can increase our intake of omega-3s with twice weekly servings of fatty fish, such as salmon, mackerel, sardines, and herring, or even trout, or by supplementing with fish oil, krill oil, or for a vegetarian or vegan option, algae oil. You can also get omega-3s from flaxseed oil and borage oil, which are additional sources of plant-based omega-3s for anybody that is not into the fish oil. Let's talk about the main health concerns impacting men. So from heart disease to prostate cancer to depression, men really do face a variety of health maladies every single day, or they may be at high risk for these diagnoses without even knowing it. So understanding the top 5 health concerns that men face really does put you in the driver's seat of understanding your body and your health overall on a deeper level. So let's start with talking about cardiovascular disease. Roughly 54% of men in the United States are managing a diagnosis of cardiovascular disease. That's over half. It's a really high number, but there's something good to be done about it. So let's dive in and talk about this a little bit more. Cardiovascular disease is a common disease that men are diagnosed with, and it's a group of diagnoses that consist of things like arrhythmia or an irregular heart rhythm, valve disease, coronary artery disease, heart failure, peripheral artery disease, pericardial disease, and other conditions. The danger here for men is being underdiagnosed or even having a late diagnosis because they don't go to the doctor as much as women, and that can cause further progression of the disease in some prior to getting diagnosed. The American Heart Association lists some risk factors for heart disease, including increased age, hereditary risk, smoking, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, physical inactivity, obesity, overweightness, and diabetes. The good news is that heart disease can be positively impacted and the risk can be reduced with lifestyle interventions, such as reducing animal proteins in favor of fiber-rich plant-based proteins, reducing our intake of inflammatory oils, so that's anything outside of coconut, avocado, or olive oils, prioritizing adequate sleep and physical activity while avoiding risky substances such as tobacco and alcohol. When I was doing the research for this presentation, I was shocked to find the statistic that roughly 1 in 8 men in the United States will be diagnosed with prostate cancer in their lifetime. That's a really high number. In 2021, there was an estimated 3.3 million men in the United States that were dealing with prostate cancer diagnoses. And as of, I believe it said 2023, there is roughly 300,000 new diagnoses of prostate cancer in the United States every year. Thankfully, there are some nutrition interventions that can help. Studies have shown that diets high in lycopene, which is an antioxidant found in tomatoes and watermelon, as well as high intake of cruciferous vegetables. So that's like your broccoli, your cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale, collard greens. They may decrease the progression of prostate cancer. And of course, your preventative screenings can decrease progression as well, or at least catch it early. Type 2 diabetes. More men will struggle with type 2 diabetes than women, with about 15.5% of men being diagnosed versus about 13% of women being diagnosed. Type 2 diabetes has a variety of root causes, including a sedentary lifestyle, diets rich in simple carbohydrates and added sugars, genetic predisposition, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, and a number of other root causes. However, nutrition can improve and even reverse the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. Studies show that supplementation with magnesium helps the body better regulate our blood sugar levels. Fiber helps slow down the rate of digestion at our meals and level out our blood sugar, and changing the composition of our meals to be more protein and produce focused aids in better blood sugar balance overall. Depression is another big hitter for men. The National Institute of Mental Health reports roughly 6 million men experience a depressive episode in the last year. Sometimes hormonal changes can trigger depression, or a lack of connection in men's lives can contribute to the development of depression. To help reduce risk of depression, make sure you're making effort for connection in your personal life and community around you. And the National Institute of Mental Health also identified risk factors for depression, including a family history of mental health disorders, a history of heart problems, serious chronic illness, stressful life events, vitamin deficiency, and other personal risk factors associated with your medical history. And lastly, sarcopenia. So sarcopenia is age-related muscle loss, and it may seem like what's to be expected as we get older, but for men over the age of 85, there's a drastically high prevalence of this condition. So we want to try to prevent that by performing regular strength training combined with adequate intake of protein every day in our diet, and that'll help generate new muscle tissue and sustain existing muscle tissue, preventing or delaying any muscle losses. Okay, let's talk about steps you can take today. I am all about identifying action steps and the next best step in your health journey. And so while many men have come to me for like a diet overhaul, if you will, I'm actually less of a fan of sweeping all or nothing type change, and more of a fan of implementing small, meaningful actions that you can continuously compound in a positive way into healthy behavior change over time. As we unpack these 5 easy to implement improvements in your nutrition, I really want to encourage you to make a baby step goal around what we've shared today. As tempting as it may be to implement all 5 of these changes right now in the name of health, studies show us that incremental change is really the way to long-term sustainable results. So let's go ahead and dive in and unpack all of these improvements together. First and foremost, my friend fiber. Told you guys I talk about fiber quite a bit. Fiber is really a wonderful nutrient. And again, it's found in the structure of the cell walls of plant foods. So fruits and veggies, beans, nuts and seeds, whole grains. Fiber has several jobs in our body, with the main 3 being blood sugar regulation, bowel regulation, and then packaging up excess cholesterol to be eliminated in our waste. So if you have high cholesterol, I always encourage people, look at how much fiber you're getting. The average American consumes roughly 12 grams of fiber a day, where the recommendations for men are closer to 38 grams per day or more. Foods that are rich in fiber are your fresh fruits and vegetables, grains, etc. An example, about 1 cup of raspberries has roughly 10 grams of fiber, and a cup of beans, like black beans or pinto beans, offers about 15 grams of fiber. When trying to implement healthy change with fiber, slow and steady really does win the race here. I'd recommend getting an average intake over the course of a couple days by monitoring your fiber intake, and then slowly increasing by about 3 to 5 grams every few days until your goal intake has been reached. Protein. If you saw the email that came out from the wellness team today, you know all about protein and protein, which is the email. Actually, I think it's going out tomorrow, the email about protein. So look out for that. I field so many questions about protein, from how much to eat, when to eat it, where to get it, and what sources to consume it from. And the answer is it really just depends. It depends on your personal picture of health as well as the goals that you have for yourself. Most individuals following a typical American diet get a lot more saturated in fat and carbohydrates than protein. And by focusing on protein intake at each meal, we can work on restoring balance in our nutrition intake overall. Again, recommendation to start with a level of awareness around your intake now, and then aiming to increase to a minimum of 15 grams of protein per meal, working up to 20 grams, and then ultimately and eventually 30 to 40 grams per meal. Too much protein can be constipating, so I always offer the friendly reminder to increase your water intake when increasing your protein intake as well. All right, omega-3 fatty acids. They're another wonderful nutrient. They act like a natural anti-inflammatory cell cleaning machine in our bodies. Oftentimes, the American diet is really abundant in those omega-6 fatty acids, which are really quite the opposite. They're inflammatory and they're damaging, especially when we consume too much. This is a delicate balance, though, as a diet really high in omega-6s could cause an increased need for omega-3 to kind of balance it out. However, omega-6 is found in your processed foods, fast foods, and convenience foods. And the estimation is that we consume roughly 20 omega-6 particles to 1 omega-3 particle in the United States, whereas really a healthy ratio is closer to 1 to 1, or maybe even 4 to 1, with 4 omega-6s to 1 omega-3. We can increase our intake of omega-3 through fatty fish, salmon, sardines, or you can get it through plant-based foods, flaxseed, tofu, walnuts. And additionally helpful here is just reducing our intake of omega-6, right, to generate a better balance within our body. Monitoring your hydration. Hydration is incredibly important, especially given the state where we live. It's nice and warm and humid most of the year. I mean, downright hot if you've been outside recently. And I'm not sure, maybe you didn't know this, but even 1% dehydration can affect our brain function. So many of us don't get enough water in our day-to-day lives, and we unknowingly suffer from it. In fact, here's an easy test. Have you urinated in the last hour? I know it's not the most comfortable of questions, but if not, you may not be getting enough water. We should be urinating a light yellow color about once an hour with adequate hydration. Darker or less frequent urine indicates dehydration, whereas clear urination can indicate too much water. 80 to 100 ounces is a good target, with consideration that other beverages, soups, and water content of produce all contribute to our daily water intake. And of course, if you're working outside or you do a lot of things outdoors, you're probably going to need more water and possibly even some electrolyte solution. Lastly, sugar, friend or foe? I think it can be a friend if we find it in the right sources. You'll find that on the slide, I identified what I called unbound sugars. So let's start there. In simple terms, there's bound sugar, which is sugar molecules that are then attached to a fiber molecule. These are what you're going to find in like nature's carbs, right? Your fruits, starchy vegetables like potatoes and corn. And then there's unbound sugar. And so that's sugar molecules that have been stripped of that fiber and typically most other nutrients. And those are going to be found in your sweet treats, your sugary beverages, sweeteners added to processed foods, table sugar, etc. The way that our body digests bound versus unbound sugar is really different. And unbound sugar, it really causes a big surge of quick energy that's seen with a big blood sugar rise, and then a bigger chance that those calories are stored as fat. This type of sugar is also inflammatory in the body. An unbound sugar, however, contains nutrients like fiber and some micro minerals and vitamins, and that's going to slow the blood glucose surge and make the energy from that food more long lasting. So when we talk about reducing sugar, we want to reduce the unbound sugars, the sweet treats, the confections, the juices, sweetened beverages, etc. Okay, friends, we've made it to our Q&A section, and I'll wrap up by saying nutritional interventions across the male lifespan can significantly reduce the burden of disease and improve our quality of life. Getting protein, vitamin D, magnesium, potassium, fiber, omega-3s, and hydration, they all play critical roles in maintaining our muscular and skeletal health, our cardiovascular health, and our metabolism as we age.